Hello and welcome to Drive-In Double Feature Podcast. I'm Ryan.
I'm Nathan.
And this is the podcast where we talk about 2 movies a week every Tuesday and Thursday. But before we get into that, we have a Patreon over at patreon.com/drive-in-double-feature-podcast, where Nathan and I have some off-the-cuff conversations, some games, a little couple of extra weekly episodes in there, just something if you want to sponsor us. If you are a sponsor, we appreciate it. If not, hey, we still appreciate the support. Nonetheless, if you want to head over there and support us, feel free to. It doesn't affect any regular content. But anyway, today's episode, we're going to be talking about 1956, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, directed by Don Siegel. Yeah, this is an episode that was recommended by my dad. It was a movie that he watched when he was younger. Are you familiar with this movie?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm very familiar with this movie. I've seen it before. I feel like if you're in the movies, you definitely have heard of this, or at least the 70s remake as well. It's just one of those movies I think that's just stayed as a part of pop culture for a long time.
To me, it's essential sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like, it's when you think of 50s sci-fi, this is a movie that you think of right away. But let's actually hear from somebody who lived during that era. We're going to talk to my dad, and here's our little interview that I did with him right now.
All right, so we're just sitting down here for an interview. You selected the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956.
Yep, I did.
Now, why did you select that movie in particular?
I just remember seeing that movie growing up, black and white. Just the big seed pods, and things like that. And I just remember it.
Any particular reason that movie stood out?
No, it was just different. It wasn't mass killings and all that. They were, like cloning people, I guess. I don't know if that was a word back then, but, that type of thing.
You said you saw this when you were a kid. How old were you? Do you remember seeing this for the first time?
I was probably, I think it was like in the 7th grade, 8th grade, something like that. Be 1963, 62. I definitely know I saw it on a Saturday because that's when they would have movies like that on.
And that's kind of the same time period you watched Rodan, because that's the last time you and I spoke.
That's right.
And have you always had like an affinity for these like sci-fi type of movies? Because we've talked about 2 different sci-fi ones at this time. Has that been one that kind of stood out when you were a kid?
No, it's just, it was different. After looking at the movie, it was different. There wasn't killing and things of that nature, and monsters and destruction of war and all that kind of stuff, so it was different.
And what other type of movies, that really stood out to you as a kid?
I remember, can't remember the actual name of it, but I think it's Creature from the Black Lagoon or Dark Lagoon, something
Black
like
Lagoon,
that.
yep.
Yep, that.
And the sequel to that one, Clint Eastwood was in that one, so...
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Very bit part, but yes.
Yeah.
And I knew that's one of your favorite actors.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
So,
that's correct.
Going back to the movie, though, during the time, there was a lot of symbolism during, like, the McCarthy era and, like Cold War era type of, like, who's a communist, that type of thing. And that's
exactly.
kind of like the symbolism of this movie. Now, you lived during the Cold War, so, was there, like, a lot of that stuff going on that you remember? Or, like, people, like, who's a communist and that sort of thing?
No, as a kid, I guess maybe we were sheltered from that a little bit and everything. The first thing I remember about communism, or a threat, or whatever you want to call it, was like in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, where I went to elementary school. They would have the air raid alerts where the big siren would go off, and and you had to duck and cover underneath your desk at school and things of that. And the other thing I remember also was when they had the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that was very scary, because I was living in Orlando, Florida, pre-Disney.
You're right.
And, they were talking about us getting blown off the face of the earth and things, Florida becoming a big sinkhole or whatever, and so that was...
I mean, I guess if Cuba was to attack during that time, Florida would have been a likely location.
I'm assuming so. I didn't at the time, and I, didn't know, the nuclear capabilities and the strike distances and all that kind of stuff.
So that's like the only time that you had somewhat of a fear.
Yeah, and the McCarthyism and everything, I didn't really learn about that until later, in life and everything, college.
I was about to say, by that time, you were probably a young man.
Yeah, I mean, when I went to Mississippi State, we'd have political science or something like that, and you would learn about that. And I learned a lot about it just through movies and things of that nature, how directors and producers got blackballed and all that because they did something that now we think is just sort of commonplace,
Oh, now there's actual political campaigns that campaign for communism.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
it's very different time.
Not in the closet anymore or whatever,
Yeah, so to speak. Now, when you were doing those routines of the duck and cover and stuff as a kid, was that sort of oh, that's part of our daily routine or whatever?
Right, yeah. We wouldn't do it every day. They would have, for some reason I thought it was like a couple of times a week, maybe. You had to know, you'd see the civil defense little placards. Maybe if you were I was in the city of Chattanooga, and if you went downtown, you could see buildings that had those on there. You knew if the big bomb was coming or whatever, you were supposed to go to them and everything for protection, which I guess a building falling on you is better than getting blown up by a bomb. I don't know.
I don't know how much protection a desk would give you either.
No, I think it was more for our parents. And
I mean, did they explain that threat when they would do those routines, or was it just kind of like, hey, something may happen, just get under the desk?
That's it. They would say, we might have a tornado or something like that. And same thing, but I guess they did it so we wouldn't be afraid.
Well, when your parents were adults, I mean, do you ever remember your parents ever explaining this threat or anything like that? No,
that was,
never a topic of discussion.
No, that was back times, sort of like pre-Ozzy and dead.
Ozzy and Harry.
Ozzy and Harry, everything was fine, and everybody lived in a little white house with a white picket fence and all that and everything.
So comparing that time period to now, there's always looming threats going on now even. Would you say that there was those fears back then and maybe they're a lot more shown now versus back then? Or do you think there's as much threat or more so now?
Well, supposedly, us and Russia and I don't know who else, but, we're capable of eliminating human existence, and probably a lot of creatures and everything with, the nuclear arms and all that. But I don't know.
It's just kind of funny you picked that one. I mean, considering how these times are, it's just very coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, you got all these people now that, doomsday preppers and all that, it's got 27,000 cans of beans and toilet paper.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's always going to be those threats in the world.
Sure. But, I mean, when I saw that movie as a kid and everything, I mean, none of that came into play and everything.
And just something, I mean, is that a movie like you and your friends would talk about? Or, hey, I saw this movie, The Pod.
Yeah, you do. Me and my sister, she's deceased, but I mean, she was right at 5 years younger than me. She'd watch it and everything. I mean, at that time, I was probably 10, 11, 12 years old, so she was 6, 7 years old, something like that. And, she always liked movies, where the women would scream, and that way she would scream,
Right. So you and I watched this movie just recently. When you were watching it, did it stir a lot of those old memories, or just...
Yeah, just the way people acted, and things like that. And you'd see the old cars and...
Well, that was one thing you were pointing out, how like all the different car models that were there. So.
Oh yeah, those were, you didn't see Toyotas and
Mitsubishi.
Nissans and all that kind of stuff and everything. But I mean, I liked it and everything. But and like I said, it's almost like a murder mystery. You don't really know quite what's going on, and then somebody finds a pea pod, and...
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of going back to what we're talking about with the Cold War. It's just like people start acting differently. You don't know why. You can't place your finger on why they're acting this certain way, but there's something just not quite right.
That's correct. Yeah.
Last question, though. Did it hold up all those years later?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it and everything, and I thought it was good. I'd recommend it to people. I mean, people that maybe like, horror films or whatever, this might not be for them, because it's maybe a little tame or whatever, but I thought, I liked it and everything.
Well, that's why we do these things, to appreciate movies like this, so... I appreciate you sitting down with me and doing this with me.
All right.
And hope to do it again sometime.
All right. Very good.
All right. Well, there you go. That was his kind of thoughts and opinions of everything. I kind of wanted to kind of build like this table of like, this is what it was like during that time. Like, was he aware of all these issues that was going on? But, he was from a lot smaller town, so didn't really have to deal with that sort of thing. But, he did love movies a lot. And it's really cool hearing those kind of stories, like how, these movies would just randomly be on TV.
Yeah. See, like, I feel like when I was growing up, that was almost phasing out. Like, there were movies on TV, but not like really older sci-fi. I mean, this movie wasn't older when he was seeing it, but like, I wasn't really seeing movies like this. I was seeing more modern stuff.
I mean, like right now, it just kind of seems like that it's almost passé to put like a big blockbuster movie on TV or cable.
You can turn it on and like Harry Potter's on all the time or something.
Right. Or it's like, oh, I want to watch a movie. Oh, I can just hit a button and it's playing.
Yeah, there is something nice about that, because it's like, oh, I don't have to make the choice of watching a movie, but you also have to deal with the commercials.
It is, but I kind of look at it too. Back then, if a big movie was on TV, it was like an event. It's like, oh, a movie that I saw in theaters is going to be on my TV. Oh, wow. Like,
yeah, exactly. And like, people weren't watching movies at home. Like, that wasn't really a thing. So you got to watch that at home. You get to see that movie again. Like, we talked about this with, I forget what movie it was before, like King Kong, I think, where it's just a big deal.
Right. They had to go. If you didn't see the movie in theaters, tough luck. You got to wait 20 years to watch it again.
I hope you stay alive for 20 years to go see it again,
I know. Somebody's died in 1951 saying, I wish I could have seen King Kong again.
And that's what's cool about... Yeah, that sucks. They were like 1 year away from seeing King Kong again. But no, and I mean, it's such a different environment today, because I can find almost any movie online. Like, of course, there's some movies that are like hard to get, but you can pretty much get almost anything. And back in those days, much tougher to find the movies you wanted to see. It's kind of like, this is what we're watching, you know?
Yeah, and it's always kind of cool when you do watch those movies on TV. It's like, there would always be, I forget what movie it was, but I recorded movies all the time that were on TV, on VHS, and I would just have like a bunch of movies on VHS. Like my, one of my grandfathers, like he did that all the time. Like he would just, you would open up like his video cabinet and he would just have like a whole bookcase full of like VHS tapes of like, oh, this is this movie on there. This is this movie I recorded.
Yeah, I remember my grandparents did that a lot, and they had like a big VHS collection of just like recorded movies, like really important movies. But I remember when I was young going through them, I was more interested in the commercials than I was the actual movies, because some people would stop for commercials and then hit record again when it'd come back on. But sometimes you were away, you had a timer for that, and you got the commercials. And I always thought that was so interesting to go back to too.
Well, this is a side rant.
Yeah, this is a side rant.
But like my brother and my mom would record cartoons for my brother when my brother was a kid. My brother's 6 years older than me, and I would go back and actually watch all of his VHS tapes with like cartoons, and I would never skip the commercials because it was always so cool to see like commercials from the 80s, like right there on the TV.
Yeah, I always thought that was the neatest thing. So yeah, it's a good piece of history, right? And I think it's nice that if you still have those, preserve those. I think those are very important to keep.
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can see those too. There's some you can go on YouTube and just watch like just commercials, but
yeah, you can watch like 5 hours of commercials. But
thanks for listening to that ad break. Now let's get back into the movie. So, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's like I said before, it's essential sci-fi. The plot of the movie is that an alien race has come down to take over, and they're slowly inhabiting the bodies of Earthlings, and the people that know these people, they notice some differences. They aren't the same. Like, I really like how the movie starts out where it just kind of, like, you're not really sure, like this one little boy is acting really weird saying like, that's not my mother, like that's somebody different. And they're like, he's just being lazy. He doesn't want to go to school. So he's freaking out for no reason. So I really like the way that kind of starts. It's just kind of planting like the little seed, if you will. So
yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. That's what's fun about this movie. I think your dad put it best. It is a mystery movie. It sucks because we're watching this movie so many years later. We know what happens, of course, but for like to put yourself in the mindset of a moviegoer back then, it's like, okay, well, this kid's acting weird. What's going on? And then we have somebody else in the community that says their uncle has the same memories, acts the same, but something's just off with them. And it's just like, okay, the wheels are turning. What's going on here? And I think that reveal of what it is so out there that no wonder it stuck with people.
Yeah, it's because that's kind of like the greatest fear, is that somebody that you know or you love, and then one day they're just not that same person anymore. It's just everything you knew is kind of turned upside down, because I think we as human beings, we crave some type of structure and familiarity where we're wanting those same things in our lives to always be there. So when it's not there, it's like, holy crap, like what the hell's going on?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, this is one of the most talked about things in this movie, but definitely plays on fears of the time. It's a big talking point on communism, and they could be hidden amongst us. It could be your uncle, it could be your kid. It plays on that big time paranoia that was going on at the time. Right.
And the director and screenwriter both said that was not what they intended to do. They said that was kind of, they're like, it wasn't meant to be political at all. It was but just because of the news happening at the time, it just kind of got attached to it, like that stigma got attached to it. But I mean, to me, it's kind of, it's really hard not to notice those type of things.
No, yeah, even if they say that it's not connected, it's still there. It's still the time and just the way it is, It's just an interesting way to look at the movie. But even without that, I still think it's a very effective thriller. I do. I think this is a great movie. This is a movie that gets better every time I watch it. I really do think so.
I agree, because I probably watched it the last time maybe about like 10 years ago or something, and for the first time. So this is about my second viewing of it, and I forgot like how good it was. I was just like, oh yeah, that was really good. I just was totally caught me by surprise.
Yeah, and I'm not even a big fan of narrators in movies. That's like a pet peeve of mine. It's something that's a little hard for me to get into. I don't think the narrators...
So you hate Morgan Freeman?
Yeah. Oh, I hate Morgan Freeman. I hate Shawshank Redemption. I'm saying it right? No, I'm just kidding. I love Shawshank Redemption.
That's in your bottom 200 on IMDb.
Yeah, right below Baby Geniuses too. But no, I just I think the narration here is really cool. The main character played by Kevin McCarthy. It was awesome. I know him mostly from he's on an episode of The Twilight Zone, which is a show I grew up watching constantly. That's what I know him from. But he's really good here as well.
It kind of does feel like an elongated Twilight episode.
It does. I think that maybe that's why I appreciate it so much. It definitely, it is. I love it because it is very out there sci-fi. They're cloning people, or some kind of alien or something is cloning people in these giant seed pods and then infecting the whole world, replacing them. And these pea pods, they look like pea pods and they bounce like balloons, which I think is very funny because there's one scene where they take him out of a trunk and he puts it on the ground and it kind of bounces on the ground.
Yeah, I remember. They just kind of bobble along.
Yeah, it's out there sci-fi, which I love that this movie's not afraid to do that.
Yeah, it really does. It's not afraid to like show certain things, like when it sees like the unfinished body of one of their friends, like laying there on the table. I mean, that's not something you'd see normally. And I did think it was kind of funny because they see like this unfinished person and they're just like, oh, he looks so weird. And they leave it on the table and they're like, all right, let's go have a drink. Like they just
And the setup for that is so funny, right? Because they're like, hey, we got a dead body. Can you come over here and check it out? And he's just out for display.
They don't call the police or anything. Just like, you just call him up.
Yeah. Call up the doctor.
So you said something. You said, it was kind of funny. Did you know that this movie was at one point intended to be a comedy?
I did not, because it doesn't feel like it at all.
So there was a lot of scenes in here with a lot of humor in them, and I don't know what the scenes were, but apparently like Don Siegel had directed a bunch of like comedic scenes to put in the movie, and it had like a really weird tone, and like they said they played it for test audiences, and like nobody was scared. They were all just like laughing like throughout the whole movie. And apparently I got one of the studio heads was like furious that they did that and demanded that all humor be cut out of this movie, which is kind of funny because I'm just like, I can't even imagine what this movie would like, the funny version of this movie.
What would the funny version of this movie be? Like, what would the joke even be? Like, oh, like he meets his pod person and they become friends or something.
They do like the Harpo Marx like mirror gag where they're like one person's like moving a hand and it's like moving in the same.
Yeah, I could see it right now. I can't believe you told me that because I couldn't even imagine like the Blob, the way that people treat the Blob where it's like a big joke. This movie is not treated in the same way.
No, I mean, like I said, it's treated like one of the best sci-fi movies from the 50s. So
yeah, and like all I can wish for the whole time is that Daniel Craig and Nicole Kidman are in this. I wish they would do that. When will they do that?
If only.
Bad joke.
Well, I mean, so sidebar, have you seen any of the remakes of this movie?
Yeah, I've seen that version, the 2007 version. I've never seen the 70s version actually, which I've heard is a very, very good movie as well.
It is, and I would need to rewatch the 70s version to decide which one I like better, but I remember liking the 70s one a lot.
Yeah,
But
I think that's one of those movies that's on the list of like, I feel like you would always find it on the remake is better lists or the remake is just as good list.
I could see that.
Yeah.
And I have seen the 2007 version, and
you can't say the same.
I can't even tell you one thing that happens in that movie, honestly.
That's the thing. I saw it in the theater with my family, and I remember thinking it was fine, but it definitely holds no memories in my brain. Like there's like a car crash. That's all I remember.
Well, it's just for one, it's just called Invasion, so that's such a bland title.
Yeah. It definitely, and I mean, that movie's not remembered well, if remembered at all. This might be the first time that's brought up on a podcast in years.
The first time anyone's ever talked about this movie.
Yeah. But it definitely did not hold a candle to this, because I think this definitely, since I watched it the first time, it's something that does pop up into my mind. I before I rewatched it, I definitely could recall scenes. I could think about it. One of the things I love about this movie, very fast paced. It's only 80 minutes long, and it's all action. There is hardly any downtime in this movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's not one boring scene in there. They're constantly doing something. The plot is always advancing. It's either like a big action scene or something kind of suspenseful that's in there. So I really like that. One element in there that kind of heightens the drama is that one thing you're not allowed to do when you're near these pods is that you're not allowed to fall asleep, because if you do, that's when they take over.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a funny bit. The doctor passes out pills constantly during the movie. Anytime anything's gone wrong and they're just like, oh, I gotta stay up, he's like, take these. Like, it just hands people pills. And even the kid's like, here, have these. I know he's a doctor, but I just think that's silly. But yeah, that's kind of like the suspense at the end of the movie, because he's running around with a woman and they're having to stay awake the whole time. They're getting too tired, and it adds that element to it. And I think that's good.
Yeah, I just remember because they said that Don Siegel and Kevin McCarthy had just said, because Kevin McCarthy gets like a huge workout in this movie. He's constantly running, like all the time. He's always doing something, and he always insisted that he do it himself. And they said, like, by the time the movie was over, like, he would just have like these horrible leg cramps like all the time because his muscles were so worn out. So when it looks like he's exhausted, he's probably really is exhausted.
I could see it. Wow, that's like method acting kind of getting into it. Yeah, and I mean,
one other thing too is like at the very end of the movie where he runs out in the middle of the street to yell about the pod people. Don Siegel had to tell the stunt drivers, like, hey, watch out for Kevin McCarthy. He's really tired. Make sure if he falls over, stop.
Oh my God. And like the traffic in that scene is actually like particularly like heavy too. Like he's hitting cars and everything. Could you imagine if he just fell over
And someone just runs over him?
Oh my God. Well, luckily that didn't happen. I saw here Kevin McCarthy lived to 2010. So he lived a very long life. I don't know what
or his pod did.
No way. I thought his acting was different after this one.
He seemed a little different after this movie.
Like a communist. A little weird. But no, it adds this whole movie has this paranoia feel, and I will get into spoilers. This is an old movie, but I forgot this movie actually ends happy, and not happy in quotations, but it ends somewhat positively.
Yeah, I forgot that too. Because that's. You think it's going to just end like on this really dark note where it's just like they've taken over the world, but I guess back in the 50s, they wouldn't allow for that sort of thing. Well, like on the Twilight Zone, I mean, definitely they would just be like, yeah, the world is doomed.
Yeah.
But and this time they're just like, all right, send the troops out. We'll get those pod people.
Yeah, because this movie's told all from the point of view. It's one of those movies where the ending is the beginning of the movie, and it's, oh, this is what happened to me, and it's all flashback, and then it cuts back to the beginning, and everyone thinks he's crazy. But somebody says the right thing. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin McCarthy has the moment where it does a freeze frame. Said, "Yep, that's me." You're probably wondering how I got up here.
Did you know that came from this movie?
No, I'm being funny, but I did like the ending of the movie. It's where because it's so frantic. He runs out in the middle of the street to yell about these pod people, and he's literally looking to the camera, being like, "It could be you. It could be any one of you."
Yeah, it's like Reefer Madness, but good. Where it could be you.
Or Hitler, dead or alive, saying that we should get those Nazis.
Hey, it's people want to talk about breaking the fourth wall meta. They were doing it way back in the day, man. Invasion of the Body Snatchers was doing it, and it's great because that shot of him looking at the camera, he looks so crazy. The background is black, and like God, I really like his performance here. He's got really a good charisma going on.
Yeah, he does a really great job in there, and no one really bad in the movie either.
No.
I mean, again, this is like I said, this is a well-made movie.
Yeah, and the reason they get caught is because they do get caught at one point is because they're pretending to be pod people, and the main woman screams when a dog almost gets hit by a car. How convenient. But yeah, I do like it.
That is kind of funny, and they do that in other remakes where they try to pretend to be pod people. So it's always kind of fun when they try to do those types of moments. Yeah. Well, one other thing too. One of the not the main female, but like the wife of Kevin McCarthy's friend or whatever that's in there. She's actually Morticia Addams from the original Addams Family TV series.
Holy crap, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Any wacky coincidences?
Well, another funny thing they said, so at first they don't, like the doctor, they don't really realize that it's aliens. They think it's something going on that at first they say it's a contagious neurosis.
Yep.
And I'm like, and I thought about that. I'm like, that may be one of the most horrifying concepts like you could actually think of, where it's just like people are going crazy and it's contagious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just craziness is contagious. That is scary. But then
like
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, imagine like in this climate with like people freaking about, illnesses and things like that. Imagine if you lost your mind. You just went crazy from like anybody that caught that.
Yeah. And that is scary. But then they kind of chalk it up to mass hysteria, kind of with what's going on with the world. But I think that's a bit weird to chalk it up to mass hysteria. Well, my thought is the two people he talks to were already converted pod people, and they were just trying to convince him otherwise. That may be the idea, because I was thinking from that perspective at the beginning of the movie, what if a good chunk of people he was just talking with, interacting with, were already pod people?
Well, yeah, and you don't really realize, because he does talk to, or his friend does show up later in the movie, and he thinks like, oh, well, good, you're here, you can help me out, and then he realizes like, uh-oh, he's a pod person.
Yeah, and I that isn't that scary? Like someone you just talked to the other day was normal. Well, we already talked about this, but I think that's a cool little twist in the movie.
Well, that's the thing too. They because the pod people do try to convert him, and they do try to say like it's going to be a good thing, or like he said, well, I still be able to love like my girlfriend or whatever. I mean, like, will I still be in love? Will I still feel things? Like, oh, there's no need for feelings. Why need that when you could just be, live your life and you don't need to be burdened with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's funny because his girlfriend falls asleep for like a second, and then she wakes up, and then, you know, she's a pod person. She's instantly like, you'll be so much happier. I'm happier, when she's only been a pod person for 5 seconds. Just instant joy.
She's probably just happy because you got a couple of minutes of sleep. It's
Yeah,
like, I
I'm
feel
sure.
so refreshed.
Me too. I get it.
But yeah, I mean, you know, for me, I think you got to see this movie for yourself, because, I mean, we could just sit here and explain the whole plot and everything bit for bit, but it is an essential sci-fi movie. I've said that already. But again, I would just want to reiterate that if you love sci-fi, and I think you doing yourself a disservice if you don't see it.
Yeah, check it out. If you enjoy genre films at all, it's definitely an essential watch. Check it out. Yeah, can't recommend it any more highly.
Right. Well, I think that's it. Anything else we want to add?
No, that's it for me.
All right. Well, Nathan, I think we got a little something special in store for next time. Why don't you go ahead and let the audience know?
All right. So this is a big thing going on. It was Ryan's idea, but we came together, talked about it, and I thought it was a great idea, and I'm really excited to do it. All next month, the month of August, is Bert Reynolds month. We're talking about all things Bert. We're talking Bert Reynolds movies. You know, there's a lot of hits, a lot of not hits too, but I'm excited to talk about them. So what's coming up first for Bert month?
I think we need to just start at his big breakthrough role.
Okay.
And that one will be 1972's Deliverance.
Deliverance. All right,
and,
cool.
So if you do want to watch that along with us, it's on Netflix right now. It's a really good movie. It's going to be Nathan's first time watching. I'm really excited to see what he thinks about it.
Mm-hmm.
But how it's working is I picked 4 Burt Reynolds movies. Nathan picks 4 Burt Reynolds movies. We're going to be talking about those all month long. Hope you join us.
Mm-hmm.
And also, for the time being, if you want to send us any thoughts, opinions, email us over at driveindoublefeaturpodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at DIDFpod. Again, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/driveindoublefeaturepodcast. But until next time.
Until next time.